Well, criminal justice students, we have the opportunity today to speak with Mike Moore, and we are currently at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Klamath office, for lack of a better term, down on Miller Island Road. And Mike, for the benefit of the students, what would you say your official title is here with the ODFW?
I am the Assistant District Wildlife Biologist here in the Klamath District, and that pretty much covers all of Klamath County.
Gotcha. So you have been a guest speaker before for the same class, and one of the unique things that I know about your personal history is at the beginning of your higher education, you actually took a criminal justice major, and then you moved on to the higher, schooling level required to eventually become a biologist. And some of these students might be wondering, why are we speaking to a biologist? You are not a sworn officer, and yet your office and you specifically represent the branch of state government that is very, very involved in maintaining, our natural resources, healthy habitats, and yet also you work hand in hand quite often with the state police, primarily with the Fish and Wildlife Division, but you also will come into contact with hunters and fishermen, and you have a very job filled with variety. Would you say that's
absolutely
correct? So walk us through, if you don't mind, just and I know there's no typical in your job either, but what does a week look like? I mean, you can start it here in the office, but sometimes, what does your week look like?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It varies significantly. We kind of joke in the field that you have a plan, but the first phone call changes everything. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very fluid job. We have a game plan generally on what we're doing, and depending on the time of the year, our tasks basically, they're broken into a handful of different things. Land use, suppose a resort or something is coming in, or a big solar project. We want to work with developers to minimize the impact to the natural resources. Mm-hmm. Other habitat improvement projects, say like the Bootleg Fire, a big 400,000 plus acre fire that happened here just recently. Mm-hmm. Worked with landowners to provide some seed and some different opportunities to be able to do some habitat enhancement to benefit the wildlife species. Damage, and that's kind of an umbrella term that we use, and it could be anything from deer that are eating flowers to woodpeckers on the side of the house to a skunk under the porch type of a thing. And then we have our survey efforts we do for a suite of different species, just to have good tabs on the herds, and just make sure they're healthy, and there's, for those huntable species, that they're not being overhunted to where for perpetuity be able to keep the populations healthy. And then outreach, such as this, or right. Hunter contacts, people wanting to know where to hunt, how to hunt in some cases as well. And so that pretty much encompasses what we do across the board. But depending on the time of the year, it can vary, depending on which one of those it lies under, or the first phone call that comes in can change the day.
Yes, yeah, it most assuredly can for you. So you can literally be working on a report or some stuff here at the office, and then get a phone call, and then in the next hour you have a tranquilizer gun, and you're trying to take care of an animal issue, or setting traps for all sorts of different species, including cougars and bears and elk and all that kind of stuff. And then you mentioned the surveying, flying, well, you're not a pilot, but flying in the helicopter that is hired by ODFW in order to do your surveys and count different species. Did you know when you were young that this is the route you wanted to go with your career?
It's a good question. No, I didn't. I, like a lot of young folks, I changed my direction on where I wanted to go based on getting more information and being exposed to different fields. I had a couple different fields that I looked pretty seriously into, law enforcement being one of them. And as time goes and you get exposed to a little bit more, you talk to people who are in the business and do ride-alongs, and you just, as you gain more information, you start to get an idea of which path is going to be the right fit. And this is ultimately where I landed. And so it took until I was in my early 20s, probably before I really, well, about 20, I would say, when I really had a focus on this, and I knew this is where I wanted to go.
Would you say that entering employment with ODFW is rather competitive, or there are a lot of applicants? Was that getting your foot in the door? Was that difficult for you, or?
Another great question. Yeah, it is competitive. There's a finite amount of jobs and a lot of people who are passionate about natural resources and want to make that their career. And so I had a difficult time starting out. It takes some volunteering and just for me, it happened to be kind of a lucky thing. I think that opened the first door for me. I grew up working on farms, and so I had a significant amount of tractor experience and working with large equipment, and they needed someone to take those skills and put it towards making habitat. And so I fit the bill for that, and that was a 2-month temporary, no insurance, anything job, and that's sometimes all it takes just to get that first foot in the door. But I wouldn't at all discourage anyone who if they're passionate about it, then go for it. There is getting to be more and more jobs, particularly in the fish side of the world. In Oregon, we got oceans, and with salmonid species, there's significantly more fish jobs available. But as far as like wildlife or habitat, there's getting to be more and more. And there's, here in the last 5 years or so, there's been a number of different funding efforts through federal funding and state funding that are increasing opportunities for a variety of different elements. And some of those can be like conservation jobs where it's non-game. When I say game, that's huntable species, right, like the bear or deer and stuff like that. But non-game species that like some amphibians and different things, some neotropical migrant birds, they have very specialized niches, and those habitats are invaluable. And so there's getting to be a lot more focus on some of those, and that might be the right fit for some other folks as well. So I would say definitely don't be discouraged if you have a hard time getting going, but doing your due diligence and volunteering and making those connections, doing everything you can, eventually a door will open.
Did you ever think when you were starting this adventure that you would one day tackle and wrestle a bald eagle? And I say that because that was a call that both you and I were on.
Yeah, you never know what you might,
Right.
On any given day, you never know what might happen, and that's what keeps it interesting.
It certainly does. We should preface it was a wounded bald eagle that needed help, and it's very surprising how big they are when you're that close to one.
Right.
But your job has definitely a constant variety, I would think. But what, and this is no bash on ODFW at all. It's just the nature of the work. What's some of the most tedious things? Do you have to do a lot of paperwork?
It's a fine balance of field work and paperwork, at least where I'm at. And I guess one thing that I would offer to the viewers of this is there's so many different types of jobs in natural resources and fish and wildlife. My experience could be significantly different than a folks who are like working at a hatchery, or folks that are district fish biologists, or folks working on a wildlife area. So if my experience isn't quite what someone's looking for, I would also encourage folks to look at some of these different avenues, because there might be a fit that really just, a position that really is a good fit for them. So I know you had an original question, and I deviated from it a little bit. Remind me of what that is.
Let's train of thought is always fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let's skip a little ways forward. You're not originally from Klamath Falls,
right? And
being that you work for a state agency, you've been allowed to transfer. Is that correct?
Transfer. I moved from one position to another. That's a similar. Okay. I guess the definition of transfer is they just kind of move you. I applied and was awarded the position, but essentially I came from another office. I spent some time in the Dallas office, and before that I worked on a wildlife area near Corvallis called E.E. Wilson. So those are the few main steps that I've taken until getting here.
Right. If you had that crystal ball and was able to do everything over again, would you choose the same route that you have followed, or would it be slightly different?
Great question. Again, I would. This position, this field, this job, everything is a great fit for me. So I would definitely point myself in this direction, knowing what I know now and the skill sets that really are going to be of a big benefit for this. It would be a slightly different version. When I was in college, I would tailor my classes to things that I know now would benefit more. And early on in their career, I found as you do some seasonal jobs, that experience can really, really help as you move into a permanent job. Just having all cross-pollination, I guess is what I call it, where you have all these different skill sets and these connections that you bring in can really help you bring the most to a position. So it would be the same, but it would I would tailor a little bit different, knowing what I know now and to help me to serve this position the best.
And your line of work, it's not just all science, and you also have to have a decent skill in public speaking. And for our students who may not kind of realize that, but you have been called upon by ODFW to speak at symposiums, meetings, and a variety of other occurrences. And I've heard you mention it before, that you need to constantly keep in mind the different stakeholders that you're dealing with, which for some students, specifically that's, the ranchers, the environmental groups, the conservation groups, but then also, hunters and fishermen and recreators and all sorts of things. So do you think public speaking is, one of those things that a individual thinking about following in your footsteps, would that be something to work on, and communication skills?
Yes, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker if you if that's not something that is a skill set. I mean, that can be developed to some extent, but it's as far as the public speaking, it is a portion of what we do, and it would certainly serve the position well, but also to kind of take that to a different point that you had within that question is the sense of diplomacy. I think that would serve a person in this position even better. And they're both valuable skill sets, but working with so many different stakeholders, Oregonians they're very passionate about the natural resources. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of different stakeholders that have different viewpoints on how to, preserve Oregon's natural resources and keep that legacy going. And so to be able to navigate through those waters with the different stakeholders, that's a very valuable skill set that Some people may take to it naturally, and other folks may be something they develop in time with their career. But people management is just as much a part of this job as wildlife management. I was told that when I was in college, and I was a bit naive to what the job would be like going out there, and as time has shown that it's absolutely true.
So, final question for you: for those students that want to possibly pursue path for state employment or ODFW, OSP, or a variety of other entities, what are some suggestions you would give to these students now that they might try and do to where when they are in the application process, they stand out some? What sort of suggestions would you give?
Oh, anything and everything that will, that's associated with this. Having an opportunity to go out and just network with biologists, to volunteer. It is a competitive field, but the people who go that extra mile, they're the ones that get in. And so the opportunity is absolutely there for people who have grit and want to kind of work. And some folks right out of the gate, they have a great opportunity. Other folks work at it a little bit. So that would be my suggestion: is if this is something you're passionate about, just don't give up, and understand it's going to be a journey getting there. They don't hand out the positions to anyone and everyone,
right.
But the volunteering, any effort to network and just get out, and if you're not there in person, to be able to go to workshop, the Wildlife Society. You can network, and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is just one of many agencies that do natural resource work. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service, BLM. There's a suite of different, and there's nonprofits as well, and so they're all kind of part of the big picture. It's called natural resource management, and so in time you'll find where that fit.
Terrific.